Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Infirmary, where it is my job every, not week, but every time we record, for me to dispel some of the misconceptions that I think float around out there in the triathlon, cycling, running, and endurance worlds. And today we are talking about a topic that comes up all the time, which is basically what actually holds swimmers back other than drag. That's the big joke, and we're actually going to get to that in a little bit. But so many triathletes struggle to swim more effectively. And I think the big reason for that is that they don't understand the limitations of the technique and how much harder it is to improve at swimming than it is for cycling and running. So today, I'm going to walk through a presentation that I gave for the Bend Triathlon Club. And if you're listening to this in podcast world, you might want to jump over to our YouTube channel to look at some of the videos. And I will put a link to that in the show notes on our podcast channel. But yeah, let's get into it and talk about what actually holds swimmers back when the water. So, a little bit about me. So, I'm Chris Bagg. I'm the head coach and founder of Campfire Endurance Coaching. I was a professional triathlete from 2006 to 2021. I've been coaching since 2009. Shout out to Shane Harrison, my first athlete a million years ago. And most pertinently to this presentation today, I'm a Swim Smooth certified coach. There's about 40 or 50 of us in the world, and there's a fairly involved process of becoming certified. One of the most beneficial things that I've done in my coaching career, because what's great about Swim Smooth is that it really approaches from putting the swimmer first and putting the technique of that particular swimmer first, rather than trying to copy one certain style of swimming. So, what are we trying to do when we swim? A lot of the time, this is something that people kind of take for granted, but it's really important, I think, to outline it here at the beginning. So, first of all, creating propulsion. We need to actually take water from out in front of us, and then we need to put it behind us. And the act of grabbing that water and pressing on it and moving past it is the act of creating propulsion. We also make a little propulsion with our kick, but not very much. And we're going to get into that a little bit later and talk about why we really don't want to expend too much energy on the kick. You also get a little propulsion from the rotation of your hips. Just like most sports, hip rotation is one of the things that really powers your ability in this particular sport. But the vast bulk of the propulsion in swimming comes from your hand and your forearm getting into the correct position and grabbing that water and putting it behind you. So that's goal number one. Goal number two, limiting drag. Water is 800 times more dense than air. And so if you think about riding a bike and realizing that 70 to 80% of your power when you're riding a bike simply goes to overcoming wind resistance, and then we get in the water, which is, as I just said, 800 times more dense than air, you can really begin to see that drag is a very big limiter for people who want to perform well when they are swimming. So we have to limit drag in as many ways as we can. And then finally, not dying. Yes, this might seem a little silly, but you are an upright bipedal mammal who breathes oxygen that you're able to extract from air. When we swim, we become quadrupedal horizontal mammals that cannot extract oxygen from the medium around us, and that can kill us. So it stands to reason that a lot of people who did not grow up swimming and are learning how to swim as an adult have a lot of real powerful anxiety about getting in the pool, and then especially getting into the open water where the water is dark, there are other people around. It can be a very anxiety producing experience. And so if this is you, if you get really anxious when you're in the water or about to get in the water, it's really normal. So don't worry about that too much. And that's something that we need to get beyond when we are working with swimmers, getting them to be more comfortable in the water. Because if you're thinking about not dying, you're certainly not thinking about creating propulsion or limiting drag. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice if swimming were more like cycling or running? When you ride your bike or run, mostly you put effort in and you get most of that effort back in the form of improved fitness or improved speed. Because swimming and cycling and running are not hugely technical sports. Yes, running to some degree is going to be limited by your run form and your run technique, but we know that if you run more and more and you pay just a small amount of attention to technique, your run form will improve kind of by itself. That's not the case with swimming. You really have to be very intentional about your technique if you want to actually improve as a swimmer, because swimming is a lot more like golf than cycling or running. It's a intensely technical pursuit. When you try to hit a golf ball correctly, there are so many things that have to happen in the correct order in order to actually get that ball, not even 200 yards down the fairway, but like just off the tee box and up into the air. And that is difficult. And if you wanted to get better at golf, I don't think that you would just head to the driving range and just blindly hit thousands of golf balls without ever taking a lesson, figuring out the different aspects of a golf swing, the stance, how you address the ball, your head position, trunk rotation, all of that stuff. I think when you're trying to play golf, you would think, oh, I really have to get after those things and learn about them. But most triathletes are the golfer who's like, nah, don't need to learn any of that stuff. And they just go to the driving range and just hit thousands and thousands of balls badly. If you're somebody who has always neglected your technique, that's essentially what you're doing. You're going to the pool and you're ingraining bad habits that are going to put a real plateau, a real limiter on your development. So yeah, triathletes, they just go to the pool, they hit a million golf balls. I think you can probably see why that doesn't work. So here's $1 million question. Or for you, how much have you spent on your swim over the years? Um, and the big question here that I hear from a lot of people is, are you supposed to only do technique until you actually get better at swimming? And the big answer here is no. So you might hear from a coach something like, you should only swim 25 yards or 50 yards until you can swim it perfectly. That's great for swimming 25 or 50 yards perfectly. But if you only do that, you're never going to have enough fitness to actually work on your technique for longer than 25 or 50, and then your stroke is going to fall apart anyway when you start getting fatigued. And then when you go do a race, your stroke is going to fall apart within 200 yards or something like that. So we need to do technique work, but we also need to do our fitness work at the same time. And if we're a triathlete or an open water swimmer, we also need to work on open water skills, which we can do out in the open water, makes sense, but you can also do in a pool. There's a lot of different ways that you can work on those skills in a pool. And this is what I think is so great about Swim Smooth's approach, is that it thinks about training and fitness, technique, and then the specific skills of our particular sport as the three parts of the triangle or the pyramid that supports better swimming. Here's another great aspect about Swim Smooth is that they talk about coaching the individual, not a particular stroke. And this comes out of what I would probably call the Michael Phelps effect, where a lot of swim coaches have been like, well, Michael Phelps is an excellent swimmer. Maybe we should just, try to copy his stroke when we're coaching our swimmers. Michael Phelps is like 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". He has an insane wingspan. He's also spent almost his entire life in the pool, probably swimming 7 days a week, getting in 10 to 15,000 meters a day. That kind of volume is going to dramatically transform your stroke. And if we're not swimming that much and we don't have Michael Phelps' natural gifts, it's going to be almost impossible to swim with a stroke that looks and functions like his. So instead of trying to fit a normal swimmer into a Michael Phelps sized hole, what Swim Smooth does is they fit every swimmer into one of six swim types, and no one is every single is not just one type. You're usually a mixture, but there's very often one presenting issue from each of the swim types that is your big thing, and that kind of determines what swim type you are. And each of the different types has a different way forward to preparation. Here are the six swim types. Again, if you're in podcast land, jump on over and watch our video. I'll also put up some images on our podcast feed about this. But we've got six swim types. We have Arnies, Bambinos, Kicktastics, Overgliders, Swingers, and Smooths. Well, the Bambino is someone who is very uncomfortable in the water, who has a lot of anxiety around getting in the water. Usually that anxiety is about breathing, about keeping their head and their face underwater. A lot of the time, Bambinos have some sort of near drowning experience back in their history. And that's, really nerve-wracking for them. It's very anxiety producing. And so all of the Bambino stroke faults usually come from the fact that they're very uncomfortable in the water. Arnies, big, powerful swimmers, usually very good cyclists and runners who are very confused about the fact that they are not as good swimmers as they are cyclists and runners. And what they try to do is they sort of try to beat the water into submission. And that tends not to work. That tends not to actually function. Arnies tend to start fast and then die pretty quickly because they can't keep up the pace because they generate so much drag along with a little propulsion. And so they're basically fighting themselves when they go through the water. The Overgliders love to talk about swimming instead of actually getting in the water and swimming. Usually very thoughtful, maybe overthinking types. And Overgliders tend to be obsessed with what they think is efficient, where if they take as few strokes as possible, they are going to be expending not very much energy. But let's go back to that thing where we said that water is 800 times as dense as air. And if you think about that, there is no such thing as gliding when you're in the water. There's only deceleration. So if you are not taking many strokes, you're spending a lot of time in between strokes decelerating. So you might not expend much energy because you're not taking many strokes, but you're also going to go really slow. And so it doesn't really matter if you're being efficient if you are swimming 3.5 minutes per 100 meters. That's just not going to get you there in the way that you want to. The kicktastic, propulsion in the wrong place. As we said earlier, most of your propulsion comes from your hand and your forearm getting into the correct position and pushing water back behind you. Kicktastics usually have a very weak catch and pull at the front of the stroke and a very overactive kick. You can't convert very much of your kick into forward motion in the water. It's a very inefficient way of traveling, and it uses some of the biggest muscles in your body, especially for triathletes who spend a lot of time on their bike. We don't want to use our quad muscles because, oh my gosh, they take up a lot of oxygen. If you're taking up a lot of oxygen while you're swimming and you can't dedicate that to the front of your stroke, you're going to be both slow and out of breath, which is, not what we want. So that's what happens with the kicktastic. The swinger, ha ha ha. Yep, I know, very funny. Different countries, different slangs. Let's all get over it. Most elite triathletes are swingers. They tend to have straight arm recoveries, and the recovery is the part of the swim stroke where your arm is above the water. Usually a very high stroke rate. Sometimes their stroke looks kind of punchy or awkward or choppy, and swingers tend to describe their own stroke as ugly. But most elite triathletes are swingers, and it is a really, really great style for open water swimming. With that high turnover, you tend to punch through chop. It's easier to get around other swimmers. You're sort of always doing propulsion. And swingers also tend to have a very light kick, which is another thing that is really going to help them out. And then the smooth. The smooth is like most excellent pool swimmers. They look really nice. They look really calm. They look really quiet. A lot of people think that's the model, but for open water swimming, the smooth is actually not as advantageous as the swinger. And we'll get into why that is later. But the big important thing that I want you to hear here is that you are going to improve differently than some of the other swimmers around you. Okay, now let's get into the 5 big technique faults. And I'm going to also connect these to a few of the different swim types. So straight arm pull, applying the brakes, low stroke count. This is very much the overglider. But most swimmers that are struggling in the water have this straight arm pull. And we're going to show you a video in a second of both what it looks like in practice and then how to fix it. Number 2, bringing the hand forward too soon. When we are recovering our arm over the surface of the water, we want to lead with our elbow, not with our hand, and we'll explain how that is getting in your way when we get to that one. A crossover at the front of the stroke. So if you are looking down from bird's eye view at a swimmer's back when they're doing freestyle, and you draw a line right along their spine, if their hand crosses over that line when it enters the water in front of them, that's what we call a crossover. That tends to result in a scissor kick where your legs split apart behind you. Overkicking, poor kick mechanics, tight ankles. Obviously, this is a kicktastic fault, but we also see it very much in Arnies and to some degrees Bambinos. And finally, holding your breath. We see this in almost all swim types, believe it or not, but we see it predominantly in the Bambino. And we sometimes see it in the Arnie, which is really unfortunate because if you both hold your breath and fight the water, you are going to run out of oxygen really fast. One very discernible trait of Arnies is that within a few minutes of getting in the water, they tend to turn bright red because they are going through a lot of oxygen. Okay, fault number 1, straight arm pull / applying the brakes. So you can see that when this swimmer, when her hand is entering the water, that her hand is actually ending up above her wrist and her wrist is ending up above her elbow. And we want the opposite. Whenever your hand is in the water, we want your fingertips below the wrist when we're looking from the side and your wrist below the elbow. And in this case, this swimmer is keeping her hand too close to the surface of the water. And so what's happening is a lot of water is running into her palm and her forearm, and that is just going to slow her down. It's basically applying the brakes. The other thing that happens with a straight arm pull is that instead of pushing water behind you, you're actually going to be pushing water down. And if you push water down, your chest is the thing that's at the other end of that lever arm, and that's going to push your chest up. If your chest goes up, your hips are going to drop and you're going to swim through the water kind of like a plow. And that is not what we want to be doing. So how do we fix this? So we bend it like Becky. This is Rebecca Adlington, 2008-2012 gold medalist for Great Britain. And the thing that I really want you to see in this video is that as soon as Rebecca gets her hand in the water, that wrist is bending, her fingertips are starting to point at the bottom of the pool, then her elbow bends, and then she is able to get a lot of purchase on the water and press the water straight back behind her. And so this is basically a perfect catch and pull. We're going to see another example of a really good catch and pull in a little bit, but this is what that looks like. And you'll notice that even when she's going to breathe, she does a really good job of bending that wrist, bending that elbow, and then pushing water straight back behind her. In case you're wondering what swim type Becky is, this is a smooth. Nice, relaxed, 6-beat kick. Stroke rate is sort of medium high. And yeah, just a really nice, quiet, good-looking swim stroke. Okay, bringing the hand forward too soon. This one is sometimes a little hard to communicate and to really get a sense of what's going on here. But the big thing that I want you to see that as soon as this swimmer takes his hand out of the water, he's bringing the hand forward first in front of his elbow. And what this does, you can see it puts this big 45-degree bend in his arm, and you can even see that kind of bunching up the muscles of his shoulder. When your body feels that tension, because you're in a low gravity environment, it's going to move away from that tension. And the result, if you look at this swimmer, you'll notice that he is actually kind of yawing back and forth and zigzagging down the lane. His head will point over to the right, and then his head will point over to the left. And it's because of that tension of bringing the hand forward too soon. So what we want to be doing is instead, we want to bring our elbow forward until the elbow is about equal with the shoulder, and then bring the hand forward after that. So there's a few things that we're going to do to fix this. So we're looking at the pop-off drill right now, instituted by the great Alexander Popov in the 70s or 80s, I believe. And he developed this drill to really work on getting that elbow to come forward first. Popov was a pool swimmer, and Paul is doing a really good example here of a high elbow recovery where the elbow is kind of pointing up at the sky. Paul's able to do this because he's been swimming for his whole life and he has fairly mobile shoulders. Most of us that have not been swimming our whole lives are going to have pretty limited shoulder mobility. And so developing some shoulder mobility is going to be important. And doing this pop-off drill is also going to be important, but you don't have to do it exactly in the way that we see in this video right now. You can just do a straight arm recovery where you're still leading with the elbow until the elbow is equal with the shoulder. And if you imagine, if you were to just kind of change this video a little bit, instead of that big bend in Paul's arm with his elbow pointing at the sky, if he was just swinging the arm straight out, so it was pointed perpendicular to the direction that he's going, that would also work really well. So the mantra for pop-off is up, back, through. Up, back, through. And we really want to make sure that you don't bring your hand forward until your elbow is equal with your shoulder. Okay, crossover into scissor kick. This is such a great example of a crossover. You can see this swimmer, especially when he breathes, is getting one of his hands all the way across that center line, that in fact, he's almost getting it over in front of the other shoulder. This really narrows your profile in the water. And if you have a narrower profile, you're going to be more unstable. If you're unstable, your body is going to search for stability somewhere else. And in this case, it's going to do that by generating what we call a scissor kick. You can see it. This swimmer's legs are splitting apart behind him, opening up like a parachute, which is going to generate a lot of drag. So this goes back to one of those things. We want to generate propulsion and limit drag. So if we can get this swimmer to stop crossing over, to land those hands wider when they're hitting the water, that is going to really help. You can also see that this swimmer also is kind of zigzagging down the pool because of that crossover. So how do we fix this? So first, you can see YMCA and then javelin drill. We're going to talk about javelin drill in a second. Most of you will know the excellent Village People song YMCA, and you probably have even done that dance at some point in your life. So the Y is basically how I want you to think about landing your hands. If you were to land them in front of you in a big Y, like you're doing the YMCA dance, you're not actually going to achieve that Y position. I've told hundreds of swimmers this, and they always tell me, oh my God, this isn't going to work. This is going to look ridiculous. This is going to be so much drag. They go off and try it. They come back. I ask, hey, how wide did that feel? And they say like, oh my God, it was so wide. And then I'll show them a little video and their hands are landing right in front of their shoulders. This gets to an important point about swim development. When you are trying to change your swim, you want to feel weird. If you're feeling something weird, it means you're doing something different. And we want to be doing something different because what we're doing right now doesn't work. So if it feels weird, if it feels alien, that is not a reason to stop. That is a reason to keep going. That is a green flag. And so javelin drill really helps us feel what it's supposed to feel like. Javelin drill is really simple. The first part of javelin drill, and the video is going to get back here to the start in just a second, but we're going to cover the kick on side drill when we get to the next fault. But the beginning of javelin drill, we are just going to be doing about 25 yards of kicking on side, just like we see here. The only difference from the kick on side drill is that we've got one of these Arnies freestyler paddles on the lead hand. You do that for 25, and then you are going to take it into just normal swimming, but you're only going to breathe every 4 strokes away from the paddle. So you can see Paul's got the paddle on his left hand, and he's going to breathe to the right every 4 strokes. The reason we do this is that the crossover usually happens when you're breathing to the other side, and these fins have a little keel on them. And so it makes it a little bit easier to feel when your arm is not landing in front of the shoulder. And you can see Paul's doing a great job here of landing that paddle right in front of the shoulder. So 25 kick on side, and then 25 swimming, breathing every 4 strokes away from the paddle. This is a great, great drill to get rid of a crossover. Okay, poor kick mechanics and tight ankles. This swimmer has both. Both over kicking. You can really see just a lot of motion going on here. And you can see that this swimmer has a slight down angle to his body. So he is, generating quite a bit of drag as he is going through the water. You can also see that most of the time his toes are pointed at the bottom of the pool. That is a feature of really tight ankles. And triathletes, because, they ride around with their feet locked in one dorsiflex position, and then they run, which can also generate quite a bit of ankle tightness, tend to have tight ankles. If you have ankles that lead to your toes pointing at the bottom of the pool, you are going to generate so much drag. You're actually going to be kicking some water forward. And so we really want to get away from something like that. How do we do that? Okay. You only need to kick enough to keep your hips afloat. You can learn a very quiet 2-beat or 6-beat kick, and also you're going to need to mobilize your ankles. So 2-beat or 6-beat, what the heck does that mean? Okay, this is Shelly Taylor-Smith, one of the greatest open water swimmers of all time, maybe even the greatest. You can see, obviously, she has incredible ankle mobility. Those toes are pointed directly behind her, and she is taking 1 stroke per 1 kick. Very nice, quiet. She's not expending almost any energy out of the kick. Perfect body position. There's just enough kick to keep her hips up, so the front end of her stroke can really focus on powering her through the water. And I want you to notice that just like Rebecca Adlington, Shelly has an absolutely perfect catch and pull. The hand tips down forward first, then the elbow bends, and she presses the water straight back behind her. So this is a great example of a 2-beat kick. Here we have Jono Van Hazel, 2004 Olympian, and the prototypical smooth. And you can see that here he is getting 3 kicks in between each stroke. And so for 2 strokes out in front, he's taking 6 kicks. This is called a 6-beat kick. This is the way that a lot of smooths swim, because that's generally how pool swimmers are taught to kick. Okay, now that you have identified what type of kick you've got, we want to quiet it down and optimize it, which is what the kick on side drill does. And when we're doing the kick on side drill, you've got fins on. You have one hand extended out in front of you. You can see that Paul is rolled completely on his side, so one hip is pointed up at the sky. The other hip is pointed down at the bottom of the pool. The offhand is just resting on his hip. He's looking straight down through his armpit. He's not looking out across the surface of the water. And then, most crucially, this front hand is about a foot below the surface of the water. I see a lot of swimmers doing this drill, and they hold their hand up at the surface of the water or even out of the water. And that's just going to put you in that kind of angled position, like you're swimming through the water like a plow. That is obviously not going to be very helpful in terms of actually getting you to, move through the water effectively. And then finally, You can also see that Paul does a really nice job of swimming in a straight line. That's because he's keeping that front hand straight in front of his shoulder and he's pulling his shoulder blades back and together with some excellent posture. Okay, there are 5 things to think about when we're thinking on kick on side. And so I know that's a lot, but the most important one is that lead hand is 10 to 12 inches below the surface of the water. I can't tell you how important that is. If you don't do that, don't do this drill. You'll just be ingraining bad habits if you do that. Look straight down at the bottom of the pool through your armpit. You're rolled completely on your side. Kick from the hip. Don't kick from your knee. You shouldn't be bending your knee at all. Let the fins do the work. So that will allow you to kick with just a nice, relaxed flutter kick where you're not kicking too hard. And good posture. Pull those shoulder blades back and together. Keep your head leaning on your bicep, looking down through your armpit with your arms straight out in front of you and your legs straight behind you. Okay, ankle mobility. So we've got a few different moves here. So on the left, we've got the classic swim smooth ankle stretch. You can see in the top picture, right below where it says 30 seconds, Paul's toes are tucked under and he's sitting on his heels. You're there for 30 seconds. Then you go ahead and you lay the top of your feet flat on the ground, and then you sit down on your feet again. Roll through that twice. So 30 seconds in position 1, 30 seconds in position 2, back to position 1, back to position 2. If you do that before every single swim, you're going to notice that your ankle mobility is improving and improving. Okay, dorsiflexion. Get a big green power band, something that's maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches thick. Anchor it. It's got to be right underneath your ankle bone. You can see that it's sitting right below the bulge of my ankle right there. And then we do little squats where you are just trying to bring that knee forward and to increase the acuteness of the angle of your ankle. That's what's happening when the shin is going down. So that's going to help improve your dorsiflexion and improve your ankle mobility, which will allow you to plantar flex your toe and point it behind you when you're swimming. Finally, CARs. Just go on YouTube, do a search for ankle CARs, controlled articular rotations. This is from a movement paradigm called FRC, functional range conditioning. And you basically trap that shin bone in place, and then you make circles with your ankle. This will help all of your sports. Holding your breath. You can see in this picture, this swimmer is not exhaling. Every time your face is underwater, you should be exhaling. There should be a constant stream of bubbles coming out of your mouth. This got taught as holding breath as the thing to do for decades. People thought it made you more buoyant, and they were right, but it makes your chest buoyant. And if your chest is buoyant, your hips are going to sink behind it, and we get back into that plow position that we've talked about that we want to avoid. But the big problem with holding your breath, when you exhale, you're getting rid of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is toxic in your bloodstream. And if you hold your breath, you are not getting rid of it. Your body will sense that toxicity, and it's going to do everything it can to get you to exhale, including make you feel really, really anxious. So if you have ever had that feeling in a race, it might be because you were really anxious about the start and you totally forget to breathe for the first 20 or 30 seconds of your race. And I always ask people, well, would you run like, holding your breath for a few seconds and then exhaling? And everybody's like, no, that's ridiculous. And yet we see so many swimmers holding their breath underwater. It's the simplest fix ever. You just start exhaling when your face is underwater. And the best way to learn that is a drill called the sink down drill. You're just going to float in the water and then start exhaling the air that's in your lungs. And that is going to manipulate your buoyancy so that you can sink to the bottom of the pool. Our goal is to be like the swimmers in this video who are getting down and getting their butt onto the bottom of the pool through exhaling. A lot of people think this is going to be super easy and then they really struggle to do it. Very often, those are the swimmers that have had some sort of near drowning experience when they were kids. And if that's you, it's again totally normal. A lot of people have that. And it's very, very easy to practice. So if you do have this, go to the pool. The first thing you do before you start swimming back and forth, do 5 sink downs just to get that breathing pattern kind of started. Another drill is called bubble, bubble, breathe. Just like it sounds, we're going to take two moments where we are actively bubbling in the water and then take a breath. Do it with a buoy so we can remove the kicking from the equation. And this also will encourage bilateral breathing, which is really important. Bilateral breathing is when you breathe to both sides. If you only learn to breathe on one side, you're going to have all sorts of problems with the other side of your body. Like if you breathe right, you're going to develop left shoulder problems, left hip problems. You're going to over rotate to your right and under rotate to your left. And that's just going to cause a whole bunch of imbalances and issues. So learning to bilateral breathe is crucial. You don't need to do it all the time. When you are racing or when you're doing a fast set, if you have learned to breathe effectively to both sides, then your stroke isn't going to be compromised when you breathe only to one side. And so maybe in a fast set, you're doing something where you breathe to the right for one length, and then you breathe to the left for the other length. So you're always looking at the same side of the pool. And that way you can get more oxygen in because you're trying to go faster, but you are still keeping an even amount of breathing to either side. So what does this look like in practice? Well, you get a breath in, and then your face goes in the water and you say bubble, bubble, along with each stroke, and then you breathe to the other side. Great podcasting here. Just like when you played motorboat as a kid and you put your face in the water, that is what we're basically doing in order to try and get rid of this. Okay, putting it all together. Every week, you should have some technique work addressing one of these faults based on figuring out what is going wrong with your swim stroke. And you can get a video analysis from me. You can track down another Swim Smooth coach in the world. You can shoot some of the video and yourself and have a look at it and compare and contrast with what I'm telling you today and figure out which faults you have. But do the drills that I've talked about in this video, and then just prepare yourself for the fact that this is going to take a long time. Swim development takes years, not weeks or months. And I'm sorry that that's the case, but that's the case. It just takes a really long time to change because when you think about it, like I said at the beginning, it's a really alien environment and a really alien set of movements. And so be patient. Do your best not to get frustrated and just keep doing your technique work. So again, Swim Smooth is where all this comes from. I heartily encourage you to look them up. I run Campfire Endurance Coaching, an elite endurance coaching group based out of Bend, Oregon now. We used to be based out of Portland. And here's some resources. If you want to do a video analysis with me, go ahead and scan this QR code. It'll take you to the page that'll let you learn more about it. You get 90 minutes with me. It's a 30-minute video. We articulate what's holding you back, and we articulate how to fix it. It's a really, really great thing. I love doing it, and it really helps swimmers get better. And then I'd also really urge you to go and subscribe to the Swim Smooth Guru. It is cheap for what you get. All of the drill videos from today, plus hundreds more. And you wouldn't have to wait and dig through this whole video and jump to different parts in it. There's thousands of workouts, and Paul is adding more and more all the time. There are hundreds of hours of instructional videos, technique, principles, things like that. Basically everything you need to learn how to swim effectively for triathlon and open water swimming. How to calculate your threshold pace, which is really, really cool. And then there are more workouts getting added to the Guru all the time. So you can reach me, Chris, at campfireendurance.com. Campfireendurance.com is our website. The Guru is located over at swimsmooth.com/guru. And usually when I'm doing this as a presentation, this is where we do Q&A, but you can just do Q&A in the down belows. So go ahead, leave me some comments, ask me some questions, shoot me an email. I love answering questions about swimming. I'm a total swim nerd, and I really enjoy this aspect of getting better as a swimmer. So I hope this was helpful. And if there was something that I missed, please get in touch, let me know. And thanks for coming by the infirmary. I hope we've got your swim feeling better.